Those grand old walls, the birth of the Grand Old Opry. A never-ending spotlight shines on the memory of Patsy Cline as she walked sedately toward the microphone and suddenly began to cry out the sweet dreams that still echo through the years. And somewhere, frozen in time, the applause still lingers that roared from the old Ryman Auditorium in 1949 when Hank Williams first stood on the stage of the Grand Old Opry. Tucked away in history, the roots that slowly grew to produce these golden moments trace back through a heritage of beaten-up guitars and homemade fiddles to the beginning of the old radio barn dances. Shortly after the birth of radio itself, fiddle-playing farmers and honky-tonk heroes leaned over huge carbon microphones and filled the air with their music. While they did, country plowboys and hard-working housewives tuned their magic dials and strained their ears to pick them out of the static. The music that the early country radio shows brought to life over the quivering radio waves was filled with real-world joys and tears. Farmers and mechanics laid down their tools to pick up time-worn fiddles, banjos, and guitars. The stories they sang told of love and death and heartbreak and the pure and simple joys of life. The WLS Barn Dance out of Chicago was announced as a program planned to remind you folks of the good fun and fellowship of the barn warmings, the husking bees, and the square dances in our farm communities of yesteryear and even today. The leading announcer during the first year of the barn dance was destined to play a vital role in country music history. Starting off the show with an imitation train whistle, he called himself the solemn old judge. George D. Hay, a former newspaper reporter, went on the radio in the Memphis paper he worked for, started station WMC. Soon the Chicago station hired him away from Memphis. Later in 1924, he would win the Radio Digest Award as the country's most popular announcer. He didn't direct the barn dance at WLS, but was the leading announcer for all of the station's programming. In 1925, he was hired away from Chicago by newly opened station WSM in Nashville, Tennessee. The WSM call letter stood for We Shield Millions, which was the slogan of the station's owners, the National Life and Accident Insurance Company. WSM was billed as the Air Castle of the South, and the station was destined to become the heart of country music. Hay knew from his experience at WLS that the new barn dance concept was a potential audience builder. When he hit Nashville in November of 1925, he began to look around for entertainment that would perk up the brass band music, the story ladies, and the other less than exciting entertainment that WSM had been offering its listeners. He found that several mountain-style groups had played earlier on Nashville radio and had drawn a good listener response. Remembering the success of the WLS barn dance, Hay decided to experiment with what was usually known as hillbilly music at WSM. On November 28, 1925, he began a new program with only 2 performers. 77-year-old Uncle Jimmy Thompson played the fiddle, while his niece, Eva Thompson Jones, accompanied him on the piano. Uncle Jimmy actually was the uncle of one of the station's staff musicians and was known locally for his repertoire of old-time songs. When the segment started, he was given a comfortable chair in front of an old carbon microphone. Hay then introduced Thompson and his niece and invited the audience to request old tunes. According to Hay's later memories, the telegrams began to pour in. An hour later, at 9 o'clock, Hay asked Jimmy if he hadn't done enough fiddling and might want to rest. Jimmy replied, "Why, shucks, a man don't get warmed up in an hour. I just won an 8-day fiddling contest down in Dallas, Texas, and here's my blue ribbon to prove it." The audience response was so favorable that Hay decided to recreate the barn dance program at his new station. The station's directors were not very happy with this new interest in hillbilly music. In fact, several citizens of Nashville voiced their concern over having such a common type of entertainment originate from their fair city. Nashville had been trying to establish a reputation as the Athens of the South, and this new show simply did not fit that sophisticated mold. The station's directors, however, realized that most of the people who would buy their company's insurance policies were working people who enjoyed the old-time rural music. Since business was business, Hay was given the okay to create his barn dance. He continued having Uncle Jimmy and his niece for the next few weeks and was soon swamped with calls from other local musicians, even though there was no salary involved. Almost anyone who could perform was accepted, and on December the 27th, about a month after Uncle Jimmy and Eva had appeared, the WSM Barn Dance officially premiered. The Nashville Tennessean announced, "Because of this recent revival in the popularity of old familiar tunes, WSM has arranged to have an hour or two every Saturday night." During the next few months, Hay had assembled about 25 regular acts for the new program. Many of them had no name. They were simply farmers and other salt-of-the-earth working folk who had been playing together for fun and decided to come over to the WSM studio on Saturday night to perform. Hay wanted to keep a down-home country flavor to the barn dance, so he gave the groups names that fit the hillbilly atmosphere. The groups now became official bands with names like the Clodhoppers, Gully Jumpers, and Fruit Jar Drinkers. The first of these string bands to play was led by a local physician, surgeon, and harmonica player named Dr. Humphrey Bates. Hay named them the Possum Hunters. Dr. Humphrey Bates, incidentally, was not only a well-educated physician, but relaxed to classical music. While he was on the radio or posing for promotional pictures, however, like other city slickers on the show, you could almost smell the corn in the air. In fact, the pictures of the groups often showed them in overalls standing alongside lazy-looking coonhounds in cornfields and pig pens. Shortly after the Possum Hunters joined the show, the Crook brothers became regulars. Not long after that, Kirk and Sam McGee joined up. Sam was known as one of the best fingerstyle guitar pickers of his time. It was becoming clear as more and more talent joined the list that George Hay had created something special, in fact, something grand. In a couple of years, Hay would make a quip that would forever change the name of the WSM Barn Dance. In 1927, the program was preceded by NBC's Music Appreciation Hour. This high-tone program primarily presented classical renditions. One evening, Hay made the comment that, "For the past hour, we have been listening to music taken largely from the Grand Opera. But from now on, we will present the Grand Old Opry." The name stuck, and the Opry concept became so successful that one by one station managers across the nation leaned back in their executive chairs and began to think about hillbillies in overalls. Eventually, country music shows with similar formats popped up across the country, but none would ever top what happened, and still happens, inside those grand old walls.